We are back for another episode of the Unmeasured Podcast with one of my favorite people in the entire world. We are here with Alexis Joseph. I'm so happy that you're here with me today and that I get to pretend like we are just together walking around Schiller Park with our coffees, having a chat.
I know it's the next best thing, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
It is the next best thing. Alexis, you are a dietitian, a blogger, and the mama behind Hummusapien, hummusapien.com, the food blog that you created in 2011 in order to inspire others to eat happy, healthy, and balanced. You also co-founded the local restaurant group Alchemy, which, side note, is where we met. Alexis was forced to become my friend because I went to Alchemy so much. I was there every day eating the was it called like Chunky Monkey Bowl? Is that the peanut butter bowl? Yeah, Chunky Monkey Bowl every day. I was there working for hours. I forced her into friendship. So Alchemy, is always going to have a special spot in my heart. You use your passion for cooking and wellness as fuel to help others ignite a more freeing relationship with food. And through years of experience coaching individual clients, consulting with food brands, and conceptualizing restaurants, you combine approachable recipes with nutrition education to bring peace and joy back to the table. I love you so much. I love your food. I literally, as I was reading your bio, I'm like, it summarizes it so perfectly because nobody in the world brings together gentle nutrition in such an approachable way with actually delicious recipes. Like you do it like no one else can. And anyone who's made a recipe off of your site knows this. But like, I also just want to share that Tim, Tim, he's carnivorous and he loves meat. And when we would go to your house for dinners and you would make vegetarian meals, Tim would always say, Alexis's meals always leave me feeling so full and satisfied. I do not know how she does it. Like he said that every single time that you made him your amazing like walnut tacos and like the fajitas and all of the incredible meals, like you just have a way of bringing together the world of culinary delight with nutrition like no one else can do.
Oh, that is like, I feel like I'm gonna cry. That's just the highest compliment. And when you said like Tim felt so full, I was like thinking of the word full, and it's obviously like you're physically full, and it's like, oh, maybe you don't need the meat, but it's also like it's my goal. Like you want to finish a meal and just feel like full in every way. Like my cup is full, good
Satisfied.
company, good food, good, like all the goodness. And so, yeah, it's like, it's so good to hear from you that it's like a mission accomplished.
Yes. It's like every recipe has flavor and love poured into it.
Like,
And you can so sense that. And as someone who has been blessed with the opportunity to share many meals with you in my life, like you just have such like a joy and zest about you when you're in the kitchen. Like it's so wonderful to see. And I just know that you're doing what you're meant to be doing. So thanks for sharing your gifts with us.
oh, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to do what I love. That is for sure.
Before we get to the question that we're going to be diving into today, I wondered if you might take a moment to explain to people what a registered dietitian is, because I just think it's important context. Alexis is a registered dietitian. That's why she has RD at the end of her name. And there are a lot of people on the internet who share about nutrition who might not have the background or the experience or the credentials that you have. And I do think this is something where there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and truly becoming your friend and understanding what it took for you to become an RD was so enlightening for me. So I wonder if you might just enlighten anyone who's listening who doesn't understand like what it takes to become an RD and why it does matter, like who you're getting nutrition advice from.
That's a wonderful question. So it's kind of wild because dietitians are the only people who in the US are legally allowed to give nutrition advice. So you have to be licensed, and it's a whole thing. So you do a 4-year undergraduate program in dietetics. Then, so that's like, I majored in dietetics in college. Then you apply for your internship, which are very competitive. It's a matching process similar to like, not similar to medical school. Like it's so much harder to become a doctor, obviously, but this is the same kind of matching process. So once you get matched to a dietetic internship, you have to pay to work full time and you do 1,200 hours of supervised practice. So it's divided into
1,200 hours.
You work full time for a year. So community nutrition, clinical in the hospital, and then food service, which is just a treat. Let me tell you, lots of washing dishes, lots of being at the bottom of the food chain. So you do that for a year, and then you have to sit for your registered dietitian exam. So you study, and then you take this test. And then once you pass, you become a registered dietitian. And a lot of people do an internship combined with a master's. That's what I did. So while you're actually in your internship, working full time, not getting paid, you're also going to school. So it's a lot. It's a ton of schooling. It's a ton of practice hours, and then passing this exam. And I think it's so confusing for the public because there's just a million nutritionalists and nutritionists, and there's just so many like terms for, like how is someone to know like who they're supposed to listen to? Because, online it's just like a sea of homogenous nutrition-y people. And it's like, what's a dietitian? So I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
So helpful. Thank you for taking a minute to share that with whoever might not have understood, because that was something that I did not understand before we became friends. And I was like, wow, this is truly incredible. And I feel like it's a valuable information for people to have and for them to understand. We are going to talk about eating today. The question that came in is about intuitive eating and health. And so I'm going to read the question, then we can see where this question takes us. Okay. Can I want to be an intuitive eater and want to be healthy? If so, how can I make being healthy a priority without it becoming an obsession? It almost feels like there are two camps. Camp eat intuitively but don't care about health, or camp care about health but become obsessive with every little detail. Is there a place for me? How do you navigate this? So that is the question that came in. What I do want to just read off around intuitive eating are the 10 principles of intuitive eating. So I think with social media, the term intuitive eating gets thrown around a lot and used very loosely, but intuitive eating is actually a framework that was developed by two RDs who created this framework. The first is reject the diet mentality. The second principle is honor your hunger. The third is make peace with food. The fourth is challenge the food police. The fifth is discover the satisfaction factor. The sixth is feel your fullness. The seventh is cope with your emotions with kindness. The eighth is respect your body. The ninth is movement, feel the difference. And the 10th is honor your health, gentle nutrition. So just want to throw that out there for anyone who might not have known that intuitive eating is actually this whole framework that has these 10 very specific principles that help to guide us with intuitive eating.
Mm-hmm. It's like it's gotten so watered down to just like eat the donut. It's like, do you know that nutrition is a pillar of this framework? But it's like all things. The message kind of gets lost.
Yes, it absolutely does. And I do think with the principles and with social media lacking nuance, like lacking a lot of nuance because of just the nature of it, people should open up social media and say, there isn't like the space for all of the nuance in each post that would be needed. And probably that the person posting it would love to share with you if they were having, an hour-long conversation with you or something like that. Like there just isn't the ability, I think, to go as nuanced as is needed, especially with, with most topics, but intuitive eating is one of them. And I think because of how prevalent diet culture is, that mentally, the principles that can be the hardest are earlier on principles where we're talking about rejecting the diet mentality and giving ourselves, permission to eat and, finding freedom from those food police, like that, those things can be so challenging mentally after, many of us coming to intuitive eating, being curious about intuitive eating with decades of conditioning, that I think what I often experience is there's a lot of posts that are like, eat the donut, like you said, because they're trying to speak to that, like the early on challenges of everything that's going on in your mind about like eating a freaking donut when it like feels so hard. But
Right.
that is literally one teeny tiny snapshot of intuitive eating.
Right. And it's like, you have to start, you have to start somewhere. And like, when you're trying to unlearn the language of diet culture that maybe you just discovered was even like a thing, because you don't even realize it's a problem until, and then your world kind of like flips upside down. But, when you have to work on accepting all these new foods that were off limits for so long, I think the thought of reintroducing like, okay, what does nutrition mean to me now? That's like kind of far down the road. And so, in the beginning, it's like, I don't think nutrition is like the main focus when you haven't let yourself eat a piece of bread in 3 years. And yeah, I've had clients that like that has been their story. So yeah, while at the beginning, nutrition is not like the number one focus because we're undoing so much. Of course, once you make your way through those pillars, nutrition is so deeply woven into like the fabric, call it what you will, of intuitive eating as a whole.
Absolutely. When you would you be open to sharing a little bit about your own personal experience with intuitive eating? Obviously, you have
Yes.
this incredible story about becoming the nutrition professional who you are today. And
Yeah.
you also kind of, on a parallel path to that, have your own personal experience with food, with intuitive eating, that was happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I, was really passionate about nutrition beginning of college when I was majoring in business. I took this trip to Israel and got like so inspired I met this guy that was a vegetarian. And I was like, I'm a very like easily enthused person that runs in my family. Double-edged sword, can be good and bad. But I took this trip. I was like so passionate. I'm like, I want to be vegan. I want to learn all these things. I like literally had said the words to my friends, like I would never be a vegetarian. Then I like drank the Kool-Aid. I read Skinny Bitch. I don't know if anyone remembers that book. I read like,
That was literally that book was like my gateway into orthorexia.
it was my gateway
I
into
opened that
orthorexia
door and
too.
I opened that gate and walked right in. Not
It's
to,
like,
I'm not saying anything about the book. I'm speaking to I don't even remember what
oh,
was in the
for
book,
sure.
except that there was a muffin recipe that I made and like, it was awful. Everyone was like spitting it out, but
Yeah.
I like, I don't remember the messages of the book except that I read that and it was a fast downward spiral from there.
Which like, good lesson in like terms of nutrition documentaries, period. They tend to be like super cherry picked evidence and super sensationalized, right? So you read these things and you're like, oh my God, like how could I live any other way? So I read these books and I just got like so invested and I was like, I want to be vegan. And I was a sophomore in college. I started Hummusapien, my blog, that summer and started posting these like plant-based recipes. I grew up eating a very normal diet. My mom like loved to cook. I was very lucky. I grew up with a very freeing relationship with food. We had dessert, but she always believed in like, she'd buy cookies from like the local bakery. She wouldn't buy the like packet, what, you know what I mean? So I feel like I grew up very lucky in that way. And we were very celebratory with food. And then I go down this path and my family's like, you're a vegetarian? Like, what? Like, it was just, so time passes. I'm like so into this. I decided to study dietetics. I'm changing my major. I'm just like all in. And somewhere along the way, this was like a decade ago, but I remember it was 2016 and I wrote this post, I've been changed for good. And like, it got to this place where I felt like it turned from this passion that was like bringing me all this joy to like, for sure, this health obsession. And I don't think orthorexia and intuitive eating back then were not like in vogue like they are now. And this like self-love was not like as cool as it was, in like 2014. It just like it was very much like clean eating. like detox this. And even at Alchemy, like I remember I made a salad that was called the detox kale salad, if anyone remembers that. And it was just, a very different time. And I just, it wasn't like this exact moment, but over time, I just felt like and also during this, I'm putting out content about like, that's just like hyper health, everything. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, am I perpetuating like orthorexia by talking about everything I'm talking about? And I kind of started to like really look at myself and, just kind of like curiosity about everything I was doing. Like, is this healthy? I was like losing weight, and I'm always been like a small frame person. My family is like that, but it just seemed like health was like everything. And I had never been that way before. And so, it got to this point where it just seemed like it was crossing the line of unhealthy. And I started to just make changes in my life. I was practicing at Alchemy as a dietitian. I was seeing clients for weight loss, and I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. It wasn't bringing me joy. I'm like, I don't want to counsel people and tell them how to lose 5 pounds for spring break. That's not like, it just feels, it's not what I want to be doing. And I slowly started shifting, and I started learning about intuitive eating from people like Simi, who, mind you, like legit, I feel like pioneered, obviously, there's the wonderful dietitians that started intuitive eating, but you were such an early adopter to intuitive eating, and you were talking about it in such like with such complexity and nuance before anyone else was. So I think it's just like amazing that you were doing that so early. But anyway, like starting to even change like who, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I was like, started befriending like dietitians that were kind of in this niche, like Simi and like, sorry, I know you're not a dietitian, but you're my BFF. So Simi and like my friend Anne, and I can think of all these people that I just started to kind of like learn from them. And I started like on Facebook, I like unfollowed Eat This, Not That. I'm like, I don't want to be reading about like what I shouldn't be doing. I want to be like adding more. So it's just like a lot of questioning. And then I really changed I rebranded, and I was like, I want to focus on intuitive eating. I'm not doing clean eating anymore. I didn't realize how like obsessed I was with health. Like this is a problem. And I spoke out and actually got like a ton of backlash because again, it wasn't cool at the time from people, just other like people in the space being like, stop acting like we're being too healthy and we're hurting other people. That's not true. It was a lot of like denial because it was really early on. So I actually went through a really hard time with that because I got a lot of pushback.
Your
From
post that you wrote at that time was so powerful and so amazing. Absolutely like incredible blog post. And I can imagine that there was a lot of backlash because I think anytime that intuitive eating comes up and we talk about what might be, well, first of all, I think there's the misconception about intuitive eating, which this person asks about, like, can you want to be healthy and be an intuitive eater? I think people come at it from this perspective of like, you don't want people to be healthy. You don't believe in health. Like, I think there's that. Yes. It's like, well, okay, that's a misconception. But I also think that intuitive eating inherently points out what is problematic about diet culture. And I mean, I know personally engaged in diet culture for a very long time. Like many of us have, many of us, probably everyone has, perpetuated it in one way or another, whether it's through private conversations or blog posts or professional choices or whatever. And that feels very, that can feel really hard for people where you're like, wait, are you saying I'm doing something wrong? Or are you saying, yeah.
I thought I was part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very complex. And there's the words nuance and complex, I feel like continue to come up because even like when we think about the question that you posed, it's like, there's so many angles. There's like the social wellness side of things and how the inequities in healthcare that are a result of diet culture. And then there's like big food and big pharma, which like that is a valid problem. And it's like, me personally, I am like, talk about the restaurants and all that. Like I'm really passionate about quality sourcing. And like, I don't personally buy things at the store that have like, partially hydrogenated oil, like that's a trans fat or like fake colors. And like, I'm okay. Like I can make those choices and still be an intuitive eater. Like I can honor like the ingredients I want to consume, but I'm also not in a place where I'm obsessed with it. And I have been in that place where I'm like, I'm cringing because I'm eating this thing that I haven't seen the label for. And like, that is not okay.
It feels scary.
That? Yes. Like Do I choose to buy it when I have the choice? No. And that's okay. But I think that there's so much complexity with like, it's honorable to want to fight like maybe there's big food companies that are doing things to make money that are harming the US, our health as a whole. Like that's valid. And it's like, there's so much to balance, with like who's at play in this conversation, because there's a lot of politics in food, in like the food, the my plate, it's all very political. So and food is like one of the few things in life we can control. And I think people we all like take it very personally, like what we eat, and like social media is constantly, even me, I'm like, it's so hard to not go online and be like, am I doing this right? Like, oh shit, should I be like doing that? Like even as a nutrition professional, like you can't go online today and like not feel a twinge of doubt, like sometimes, because it's just being human.
Totally. And it's every post is like a different message. And I even think like something that I experienced a couple of years ago was like, even in the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like the intuitive eating community, it felt like all of a sudden you couldn't say like anything right. Like I
Yes.
remember all of a sudden there was like a bunch of posts about how like you couldn't say the word balance. It was like balance is like perpetuating diet culture. And I was like, wait, what? And it just like these posts, these things, like they can make people feel like, oh no, am I doing something wrong? Again, I'm sure people have used the word balance to justify disordered eating behaviors. The word balance is not disordered inherently, so I think it's like, can we talk about the nuance where like you might be using the word balance to justify your disordered eating? Here are some examples of how that could look. But like it's okay to say
It's
like,
okay.
I want to eat in a balanced way, right? Like I want to have variety. I want to make sure I have like protein, carbohydrates, and fat in my body every single day. Like we need like those are things that are important. And like social media can make it feel really almost like scary to have these conversations because you feel like you're going to get in trouble for saying the wrong word or like the wrong thing, or someone's going to get like really upset with you because you said this one word but they just saw this post that said like you're not allowed to say that word anymore.
I so agree. And like, I am not an expert in intuitive eating. Like, while it's a part of how I live my life and as a dietitian, it's not like my central like role. Like I definitely, I have expertise in nutrition and food blogging. And I don't even feel like I'm an expert in intuitive eating. And I say that because I'm well aware that there are experts, and like we only know what we know. And I think there's a level of like you have to meet people where they're at.
Yes.
And it's like a lot of people are like unconsciously unconscious when it comes to like awareness with what intuitive eating is. Like they don't know. Like it is, you have to like read the book and like really educate yourself, because it is complex. And I think, again, because we don't have time to write a novel every time we make an Instagram post, you might think you understand what it is. And that's why I think, when I see dietitians or nutrition or whatever, when I see them selling services that include like help with weight loss and like intuitive eating, and I think at the most basic, we know that those two like really are not supposed to be going together, because clearly you're not focusing on intrinsic cues if you're focusing on a number. But it's like, do the people that are selling those things together, like, do they not understand maybe, or are they trying to kind of dip their toe in that world and get the best of both? Like, who knows? But it's like, I do think a lot of people really don't understand the depth of what it actually means. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
A lot of
And
topics.
yeah, and intuitive eating is a weight neutral approach, which
Right.
means that when you eat intuitively, no one can say if you're going to lose weight, if you're going to gain weight, or if your weight is going to stay essentially the same. Like it's referred to as a weight neutral approach. So I think anytime that you hear like intuitive eating will make you gain weight, or intuitive eating will make you lose weight, or whatever it might be, that's something that someone can't tell you. That's like inherently in the approach of intuitive eating. It's weight neutral. We do know that there's weight set point theory, which is aligned with intuitive eating, where if you are caring for your body in like a non, restrictive way consistently over a period of time, that your body will settle at the weight range that is right for you and your body. But no one can look at you and say if that's going to be you weighing more or you weighing less or you staying the same. And so that's like such a great point. It's like a tiny bit of like a red flag where you're like, okay, this person might be using intuitive eating, not in like not in the sense of the actual like eating, principles of intuitive eating, that
Right.
framework. They might be using it a little bit more in their own way.
Exactly. In their own way.
They have taken the terms and they are using it in a very creative way.
Reinventing. I feel like, I always think with intuitive eating, it's living in the gray. And I think that in our world, it's very hard to not want to live in the extremes. When I was I was definitely, when I was very like gung-ho vegan, and it became disordered for me because I would like want other things, but then I would like felt safe in my bubble of a label because it would like I didn't have permission because like I was vegan. And again, this is my story. This is not anyone else's story. But for me, like I definitely, looking back now, that I'm like, I do enjoy a cheeseburger. I do enjoy the chicken parmesan I ate last night. Like I have become an omnivore, and my journey, I'm still very passionate about plants, and like the more the merrier. But living in those extremes, I think it's sexy to sell the extremes online. Like you want to just jump to that thing that you can control and measure and be quick and fast, versus like maybe actually the best thing is like living in the middle where there aren't these insane restrictions, and you're just living in a balanced way. But we want to, like, those micro aspects of health that we want to focus on because we can measure them. I think is even just thinking about like Apple, are they called? I don't know. I don't have one. Those things you wear that track your steps. Like, I
Oh,
just
like an Apple
feel,
Watch, maybe?
yeah, like I just think we feel so much safer, like when we like can see the numbers, because we're just, I think as a society, we've just like grown that way. Um, and it's like, you don't get that when you're living in the gray and kind of just like having that more freeing, relaxed relationship with food and exercise, where you're not really like, you're not tracking, you're just kind of like building that intuitive, that intrinsic trust versus relying on these, external things. I don't know. So I think that's the hardest part, is like, we will continue to be fed these messages that like, you have to do these extreme things to be healthy, when that's just like really not true.
Totally. Living in the gray, it's literally like unmeasured. You can't
Measured.
measure it. It's unmeasured.
Oh,
And
love
I
it.
think the beautiful thing about like living in the gray, to use the word balance again, we need to name this episode Finding Balance.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the amazing things about that gray area is that it lets you balance different aspects of health too. It's not just physical health, although I don't even believe that being like super strict means greater physical health, but it's not just physical health, it's mental health, it's emotional health, it's social health. It allows us to bring all of those things together, and there's space for like, how does this feel for me mentally? How does this feel for me emotionally? How does this feel for me like in my relationships and my social life? And then of course, like the physical aspect, although when I was my quote unquote healthiest, I was having physical issues. I was having physical health issues because of how restrictive I was, like losing my period and things like that. So I'm certainly not saying that like the more you measure what you eat, the healthier that you get, because I found that to be like the complete opposite for me and my body. And I see that over and over again.
Yeah, like extreme health is actually extremely unhealthy. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's an irony that, I mean, I remember having clients that would come in that they weren't, they were, I had a girl that was the professional bodybuilder, and, she was incredible. And it was like, if you lost your period, it was like a good thing in that. And I was like, what? Like, that's literally your body. I always say, like, if your body could talk, what could it say? It would say, hello, I don't have enough energy to focus on the reproductive system. So I have to devote all my energy to breathing and your heartbeat and everything that's essential. So we're going to just put your period on the back burner. It's the same. I mean, even things like trying to get pregnant, like all these things, that is not essential. So those are the things that go when your body does not have enough calories to do its daily functioning. So yeah, it's just kind of it's crazy how you can get so far and think you're getting like closer and closer to this like thing of health. And then you're actually getting farther away.
I love how you said, if your body could talk, what would it say? One of my favorite practices to do with clients when I'm working with them are like mind body letters. So write a letter from your mind to your body and then write a letter from your body to your mind, like helping to create that connection, but also giving your body a voice. And it is incredible, like the wisdom that comes through when we let our bodies talk to us, when we actually, like give them space to speak and to share. Like there's so much amazing wisdom that like can come through in those moments. I know we've like touched on social media and also like more of this like gray space and balance, but I would love if you would share a bit about like micro versus macro and how social media can be like so micro, and like how that plays into your perspective of like health and nutrition.
Sure. I think it's an important thing to remember to just kind of start off is like micro cells. And like at the end of the day, we live in a capitalist society, and like a lot of people on Instagram is part of their income. It's part of my income. And saying live in the gray, be balanced, like that's really not selling my product or my server, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
So
we just do a post. It's just a post that says gray.
yeah.
The engagement is going to
Buy
be
my
through
book,
the
link
roof.
in my bio. I also think the other important thing is like, I had this moment on social media the other day, and I'm like, not every post is for me, and that's okay.
Yep.
Like, I need to be able to go online, see a message. It's like hear versus listen. Like, I can listen, but maybe I don't need to like hear it, take it in, and be like, cool. Someone who has extremely struggling with hormones might need to hear that message. My hormones are great. I'm very lucky that I do not have hormonal issues. I don't need to worry about putting oat milk in my coffee. So this all started because I just happened to see a post where someone said, don't drink oat milk in your coffee on an empty stomach, and don't really drink oat milk, period. It's high in carbs, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, I live for my coffee with my oat milk on an empty stomach every morning. Like, I don't have time to eat when I'm getting my kid ready for school. Are you kidding? Like, that is like a small pleasure in my day. I have a newborn and a toddler, and like I get up to pump my boobs at 6 a.m. and I get to have my coffee, and it's lovely. And I saw this post and I'm like, you know what? I'm sure there's a lot of women struggling with hormonal imbalance, maybe less than the internet makes you think, but yes, they're out there for sure. And for those people, maybe it's not a great thing to have coffee on an empty stomach. And I thought like, my adrenals, however, are not fatigued. They're doing great. I don't need to hear this message. And it just made me think like, man, I feel like I go online and all I hear about is like adrenal fatigue and all this stuff. And it's like, what does that even mean? And, what milk you're putting in your coffee is like such a micro, tiny detail that I think we latch onto because we can like fix it quickly or like measure it, whatever. Versus like the macro that really is comprehensive wellness and longevity, which is like stress relief, which is like investing in your relationships and getting outside more and movement that makes you feel good and eating the rainbow and eating like a variety of yummy foods, feeding your mind and feeding your soul. Like that plays into like the croissants, and we also love salads, like all the things, there's room. And social media just really makes us feel like, oh my God, like everything I'm doing is wrong. Like the milk in my coffee and this thing isn't balanced. And it's like, how do you talk to the public? And like, I have this role like as a nutrition educator. I really resonate with that more than like an influencer. I'm like, how do I talk to people about like, okay, if you're going to make oatmeal, put almond butter and yogurt and whatever. So there's protein, carbs, and fat and you're full. How do I like talk about that message and also be like freeing and like enjoy your oatmeal how you want it. And like, so it's just this like delicate dance, I feel like, about informing people when it comes to nutrition, but also not being like fear mongering. And, because sometimes I feel like when I talk about, like, for example, I was going to do a post on bars for my toddler, like bars are all he eats. And I do have, like, I look to make sure there's not a ton of sugar, and I do look for these things, or cereal. And it's like, okay, how do I talk to the public about how to find a good, healthy bar for my toddler? That isn't like triggering and blah, 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 blah. It's like so hard to not offend someone these days, and to not be like, you're not an intuitive eater because you care about sugar. I'm like,
Totally.
I care about sugar, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So,
And you still like there's permission, but like also you understand how things impact you and the way that you feel in your body, and you see how they impact you see how they impact your kiddo. And
and
it's like, yeah, I'm going to be
is.
thoughtful about
Yes.
how I feel. But I also think this relates to like the micro macro thing too. It's like with the oatmeal example. Okay, oatmeal with like some yogurt and almond butter in there, right? It's going to be more satiating. Like
Yeah.
there's fat in there. Your brain needs fat
Yeah.
to be satiated. Like that's so important. And if one day you eat oatmeal without those things, like it's okay.
Fine.
Everything's fine.
And feeling satiated will, like, when you're not eating enough because you're restricted, all you think about is food, because you're never full enough, because you're never eating enough. You're not eating until you're full. You're eating based on what someone else says you should do. And I think that talking about the kid conversation is so interesting, like as a dietitian and intuitive eater, because, and I think like with my toddler and I, like we kind of have the same, he's a human. It's like, the difference is, I can go to the ice cream shop. Like last week, I went to the ice cream shop. It was a Friday night. I got a sundae. It was amazing. It was like the salted caramel. Yum. And then I can also, it's the middle of the Venn diagram. I can also be conscious and aware of like the sugar in my son's bar. And my son had apple crisp for dessert last night. It was lovely. It was enjoyable. It's not like I don't ever go out for ice cream and my son is not allowed to eat. Like, of course he eats sugary things, but it's like, there's room for both.
Yeah.
And it does not have to be one or the other. And it used to be for me and for you, like it was just the obsession. There was not going out for ice cream. It would like ruin our month. It'd be like, so that's the difference. It's like, it's the gray. It's both.
Totally. And I think to your earlier on point, like you have to be where you are. And for some people, thinking about gentle nutrition, thinking about like just generally like having balanced blood sugar, they might not be able to hear that without feeling obsessive about it. Like, okay, tell me how to count my macros. It's like, no one said anything about counting macros. Like, look at your, like, generally are these things present most of the time? Cool. But that might be because they're still like, step 1 or 2, and they need to work on like the food police and the permission. And that might literally be a time for them where they're, it's like, I remember in the beginning of my intuitive eating journey, I specifically remember eating ice cream for breakfast one day. I just needed to show myself that like it was possible. And was my blood sugar balanced? Probably not. Like, I don't think that was probably
that was not the goal.
Exactly.
I remember going to Fox in the Snow. This is this like bakery in Columbus. It's so good. And I remember getting an egg and cheese sandwich. And like, this is when I was kind of like starting to introduce like just more normal foods. And like, I gave myself permission to eat the whole thing versus like because like I wanted the whole thing. And I was just like, I ate it all and I wasn't overly full. It's not that big of a sandwich. And it was like, yes. That is so satisfying.
Totally. And that moment was about you having like that permission. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind, like, where am I at in this process? What are my goals? Knowing that it takes time and it takes practice. And it also, like, I think it's also so important to remember like the mindset component of intuitive eating. Yes, there is the physical act of like you eating food, and like also, movement, that being like one of the principles, but like there's so much mental work like so much mindset work that goes into it. And I think it's so helpful to come back to a place of like, okay, wait, what's like the operating system of this behavior that I'm doing, or like this thought that I have? Like, what's the kind of like belief underneath there? Is this, and is it based on like a lie, or is it based on a truth? Is it rooted in like punishment for myself, or is it rooted in like wanting to nourish myself? Is it rooted in like, being like really disconnected from myself or being connected from myself? And I always think it helps to kind of like get back to that like operating system, or that root of it, so that you can see for someone, like there are things that I eat now that feel so nourishing. I could have eaten the same thing, 15 years ago, and it might have been from a place of punishment. So like it's also not always about the thing that you're doing, but it can be about like how you're thinking about it, or what the intention is, or like if the behavior is rooted in the lie that like my body is a problem to be fixed,
Yeah,
like it there's going to be stress there, and
totally.
it's going to create an atmosphere of restriction, even if you're not technically physically restricting. Like you could have sat and eaten that same egg and cheese sandwich and been thinking the entire time, I'm so bad, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm not going to have this tomorrow. It's a way different experience than like, I am going to enjoy every bite of this, I have full permission to eat this. The end result on the plate is the same, the internal result is completely different.
You know what also is nuts about what you're talking about? There are studies that show that like how what you're thinking and like your mindset while you're eating alters like how you internally like digest that food. So it's like it's exactly like you said. So like if you have you might eat something and 10 years ago it gave you like a stomach ache, or you had like gut issues, trouble digesting it because you the whole time were like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And then later you eat it and you feel like great. That like the brain gut connection is real, and
So
your
real.
body knows what you're thinking and how that's affecting how well you like digest that food, which is crazy.
Totally. And it's like our, thoughts create feelings, like emotions in our body kick off chemical responses. We feel
Yes.
our emotions in our body. So if I have the thought, I should not be eating this, you're, like this is gonna ruin your body. I'm afraid. That creates fear. Now I'm afraid my body's going to be ruined. Well, fear, a chemical fear reaction is happening in my body. What does that do to my nervous system? Sympathetic nervous system totally turned on. There's no energy to go to digestion. It's like saving
Right.
it to like outrun a bear. But if I'm calm and I'm peaceful and I'm in my parasympathetic nervous system, and that's rest and digest, it's like digestion works so much better. And so I just think we can't overlook like there's such a mental component to our health, like to our health. It's
Yeah.
so wild how much like the subconscious diet culture messaging can really create like more stress in our bodies.
Yeah, and like and the just you think about stress and how inflammatory stress is, and we're always trying to reduce stress. And I used to think like, okay, pause, how much stress is being created because I am spending 15 minutes deciding like what salad dressing I want based on blah blah blah. Like when you get to the point where what your eating decisions have become such a source of stress, and just eating overall has become such a source of stress, like that's become more inflammatory than just like not having to go through all that to make the decision and eat maybe the unhealthy choice. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think this all speaks to the complexity of that we've been talking about. It's like it's so there's so much to unpack with this topic.
Totally. Yes. And I love social media and I'm so thankful for it. And I think, like you were saying, just remembering like when you get on there, like one, you might see something, the person knows there's more nuance, but there just isn't space or the ability, to do it, or they're trying to share an opinion in a way that maybe will be like a little bit catchier or
Yeah.
might grab your attention more, because engagement is important for people who are like creating online. But also sometimes it really is the case of like good for them, not for me. Like with the oat milk thing that you were saying, maybe there is someone, I'm not saying there is someone, but maybe there is someone who where like oat milk is not the most nourishing choice for that person because of something, going on with them health related. there is space for health related conditions and considerations within gentle nutrition. Like as someone who has celiac disease and doesn't eat gluten because of that, I still feel like I can be I don't even know that I would consider myself like an intuitive eater anymore. It's just like, it's kind of, that was like a bridge to being a normal eater. I just feel like a normal eater now. Yes. Like intuitive eating felt like the bridge to get there. But I feel like I could be an intuitive eater and I can be a normal eater being gluten-free. And so I think that's also like so important too. Intuitive eating doesn't like ignore things like if you have type 1 diabetes or if you have like a hormonal related condition or if you might have an autoimmune condition that requires some like dietary adjustments, like that can so be part of the conversation. And I think this sense of it feels like there's two camps that this person, shared in their question. I think that feeling is like created from just the natural like lack of nuance that happens on social media.
And like, when it's your job to talk about nutrition, like you might not see a lot of messaging about, eating just for pleasure, which of course is so important. And, I think back to this oat milk example, and maybe that person's client base all struggle with hormonal issues. And like, that's who she's talking to. And then us, like people that don't have those issues see that. And we're like, well, are we supposed to not have oat milk? And I kind of took a step back and I'm like, wait, even if oat milk was like the healthiest or the unhealthiest thing, whatever, like, what if I just drink it in my coffee because I legitimately like how it tastes, which is why I drink it in my coffee. It's like so creamy. I like that there's seed oils because it's what makes it creamy. If I just blended oats with water, it would not taste good. I mentioned seed oils because that's one of the like, things that people.
Is it a hot topic right now?
Vilify, whatever.
Okay.
So,
seed oils are the hot topic.
Yeah. Buy my book on seed oils.
Everybody's talking about seed oil.
So it's like not like I used to healthify everything. Like I could not make a smoothie without putting spinach in it. It's like if I didn't put chia seeds and spinach in it, did it happen? Like what if it were just pink from Pretty Peaches and I didn't make it ugly like a swamp with spinach? Like it's still okay to eat the smoothie without the spinach. And I think that was a huge like turning point for me. Like, yes, when we're eating day to day, it's like, how can you add veggies? Great. And like, we eat tons of fruits and veggies. We cook at home most nights. But like, when it's Friday and I can't wait to order pizza, I'm not like, I don't feel like I have to add mushrooms. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I just want a freaking piece of pizza. And I think that's kind of like that progression. And speaking to, you can honor health and you can eat solely for joy. And that's okay, because that is a wonderful part of eating. It's just to like
Totally.
it,
Totally. And I think, it's like for people who have access to fresh fruit and veggies, like there are many people who need the encouragement and are looking for the encouragement to add more of those things in a way that is flavorful and does feel good to their body and does taste good. And there's also some people who might be like, like both of us at a certain, like, I'm like, I've needed reminders to add in some fresh fruits and veggies in my life. And I've also had seasons where like I needed reminders that like it's okay to eat pizza without a mound of salad on top of it. Like you can eat less fruits and veggies and like it's gonna be okay. You can have a smoothie without greens. And so like so important to think about like where you are in your journey and like what you want to be experiencing in your relationship, your relationship with food. And like the like smoothie and pizza examples, it's like it's both and
it's like whatever message you got online or wherever, it's like who are they talking to? And you've spoken so much to this, like it might not be for me and it might be for me. You're right, it might be someone who like cannot for the life of them eat vegetables. So it's like, great, let me talk to you about putting greens in your smoothie.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just think the nuance and forgetting like that creator might not be talking to you and that's okay. You know what I mean? It's hard to as someone who's trying to talk to everyone, it's hard to create those messages because we're all so different and what we're trying to do. And you know what I mean?
Totally. And if something like someone sees does speak to them, I feel like ask yourself how you imagine it would feel for you to implement that in your life, right? Like, how does it feel for you to add more spinach to your smoothie? Or how does it feel for you to have some other milk other than oat milk or whatever it might be? Like, be curious with yourself. How does that feel? But also, like, check the perfectionism. Like, if you feel like instantly you have to do this 100% of the time, I think that's something worth, like, I think that's something so worth exploring. And you just do, you were saying like it's, it's hard to, it can feel hard to speak to everyone. And I imagine that would be so hard, but you do such a beautiful job of sharing about food and nutrition in a way that to me is just so inviting, so warm, so nourishing. Like, I have learned so much from you. I've learned so much from just being in your presence, from seeing you in the kitchen, from
So
eating with you, like those experiences. And it's just really, it's really wonderful to get to share in life with people who make you feel like more nourished, like in your body and in your heart and in your soul. It's such a gift. You've given me such a gift.
thank you, Simi. Oh my gosh. And literally right back at you. I mean, it's like, oh, I could talk about it for days.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Me too. I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely love you so much.
Love you.